Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. If you're new here, this is the channel where we sit down with men who came to this country looking for something. A second chapter, a warmer climate, a reason to get out of bed. And we let them tell you, in their own words, exactly how it went. Tonight's man is different from most of the people we talk to. His name is Björn Ekström. He's 63 years old, from Västerås in Sweden, and he spent 38 years as a machinist. The man they called at the bearings plant when a part came off the line wrong and nobody could work out why. That's who he was. A man who found the fault. A man who could hold a piece of steel and tell you it was 0.02 of a millimeter out before he'd even measured it. Keep that in mind, because it matters. Most of the stories we cover on this channel are about men who got taken by surprise. Björn wasn't surprised. Björn is the man who sat there, in a house in Cebu, and made a decision that most people would never even think of, and then carried it out for months without telling a single soul. We're not going to tell you what that decision was. We're not going to tell you what he found, or what it cost him, or where he's sitting today. That's his to tell. What we will say is this one's going to stick with you. And if you've ever thought of yourself as too smart to end up in a story like this, Björn thought that too. He was very, very sure about it. Here's his story. In his own words, I should explain something about myself first, or none of the rest will make sense. I am a machinist. Was. 38 years at SKF in Västerås, bearings, and the last 12 of those I was the man they came to when a tolerance would not hold. You understand what that means? A part comes off the line, and it is wrong by 0.02 of a millimeter. 0.02. You cannot see this. You cannot feel it with your hand. But the bearing will fail in 18 months in a paper mill in Norrland, and it will cost somebody 4 million kroner. So somebody has to find it. That was me. I found it. I was good at this. I am going to say that plainly because it is the whole problem. Not to boast, it is the mechanism. When you spend 40 years being the man who is right about the small thing that nobody else noticed, you build something in yourself, a confidence. And the confidence does not stay in the workshop. It comes home with you. It gets into everything. My English is not perfect. I apologize for this in advance. It is school English and 40 years of reading technical manuals in it, so I know words like coefficient, and I do not always know the words normal people use. My daughter says I speak English like a manual. Fine. A manual does not lie to you. So, Marianne. We were married 31 years. That is the whole story of my marriage, really. 31 years, one daughter, one house in Skiljebo, a garage I liked more than the living room. There was no drama. People hear that, and they think it means it was cold. It was not cold. It was just within specification. Every day was within specification. You do not notice a machine that runs correctly. That is the point of a machine that runs correctly. She died on a Tuesday in March. In the kitchen, she was cutting bread. An aneurysm, they told me after. Something in the brain that had been there her whole life, waiting. And nobody knew, and nobody could have known. I was in the garage. I was doing nothing important. I want to say I was doing something important, but I was cleaning a socket set. I came in with the coffee tin because we had run out in the kitchen, and she was on the floor. And she had been there, they said later, about 11 minutes. 11 minutes. She still had the knife in her hand. I am not going to say more about that part. You can imagine it or you cannot, and either way, it does not help. What I will tell you about is after, because after is the part that actually put me on the aeroplane, and people always think it is the grief that does it. It was not the grief. It was the silence. I do not know how to make you understand this if you have not lived in it. That house was 52 years old, wooden floors, and it made noise. It creaked in the cold. The refrigerator hummed. And with her gone, there was nothing to put on top of those sounds, so they got very large. I could hear the refrigerator from the bedroom. I could hear my own swallowing. I would sit in the chair at 8 in the evening and there was nothing. Nothing coming in. Just me, and the noise the house made, and a room that had been arranged by a person who was no longer alive. I could not physically remain inside it. That is not a figure of speech. My body would stand up and walk out of the room, and I would find myself in the garage at 2 in the morning with no memory of deciding to go there. I lasted 14 months. Then I sold it. 1.9 million kroner, which for a house that size in Västerås was honestly a little under market. But the buyers were quick, and I wanted quick. Paid off what was left of the mortgage. After the fees and the tax and the emptying of it, I had something like 1.7 million kroner. In dollars, because everybody thinks in dollars for this part of the world, roughly 162,000. My pension had not started paying yet. That is a detail. Hold on to it. It becomes relevant. I told Elin, my daughter. She is 34. She is a nurse in Uppsala. I told her at the kitchen table that this was an economically rational decision regarding cost of living. I had numbers. I actually brought numbers. I had written out the monthly cost of running the house in Skiljebo against the monthly cost of living in the Philippines, and the ratio was, I think, 3.4 to 1. She looked at the paper. She did not pick it up. She said, "Papa, you're not moving for the weather." And I said something about heating oil. She let me have it. That is the thing about Elin. She is her mother's daughter. She knows when a man needs his own lie more than he needs the truth, and she let me keep it. But she knew, and I knew. And we both sat there in that kitchen with the paper between us, not looking at each other, and then she asked if I wanted more coffee. Yes, I wanted more coffee. Flight SK-1234 out of Arlanda, connecting through Doha, 22 hours and 40 minutes door to door. 14,200 kroner, one way, because I could not think of a reason to buy a return. I remember the price. I remember all the prices. You are going to hear a lot of prices from me in this story, and I want to say now, before we start, that was not caution. That was the shape of the problem. The doors of the terminal at Neaya opened, and the air came at me like something physical. That is the first thing. In Sweden, air is a thing you move through. There, it was a thing that moved through you. 32 degrees at 11 at night. Humidity, I would guess, at 85%. And the smell. Diesel, and something sweet cooking, and drains, all three at once, and not separable. I stood on the pavement for maybe 4 minutes just breathing it. And the sound. This is what I want to tell you about, because this is the actual reason I went, and it took me about 90 seconds on that pavement to understand it. There were horns, not one horn. A field of horns, continuous, from everywhere, no gaps. There was a man shouting a destination over and over. There was a generator somewhere behind me that was running about 40 RPM under where it wanted to be. You could hear it hunting, and a jeepney went past with an engine so far out of balance that I could feel it in the soles of my shoes. In Sweden, somebody would have taken that vehicle off the road. Here it was a taxi with 14 people in it and a painting of the Virgin Mary on the bonnet. I have spent my life listening to machines to find what is wrong with them. And here was a whole city of machines that were all wrong, all at once, all the time, and nobody cared. And it was beautiful. I could not hear myself. That is what I had bought a ticket for. 14,200 kroner, to not be able to hear myself think. Sven met me 3 days later in Malati. Sven Olsson. He was a maintenance foreman at the plant, retired to Dumagete in 2018, with a Filipina named Rowena, who is, as far as I can tell, an entirely decent woman who mostly wants him to eat less pork. He came up to Manila to see me. Good man. Stayed 3 days at the same hotel in Ermita, which was, I will be honest, not a good hotel. The air conditioning made a noise like a bearing race with debris in it. I liked it. Of course I liked it. He took me around and gave me what I now understand is the standard lecture. Every new man gets it. He gave it to me over San Miguel Pale Pilsen at a place with plastic chairs where the karaoke from the next building was doing My Way, badly, twice. Rules, according to Sven. Do not go to the bars in Angeles. Do not send money to a woman you have not met. When she tells you about the sick mother in the province, that is the test, and everybody passes the test the first time and fails it the second. Do not buy land. You cannot buy land. And if a lawyer tells you there is a way, the way is that you give the land to somebody else and hope. Do not marry anyone in the first year. Check her paperwork. He said that last one, and I did not write it down. He said it. He actually said it, out loud, in Ermita in April. And I nodded, and I thought, good advice for a certain kind of man. That is the thing I have to be honest about with you. And I would rather not be. But there is no point telling this story if I lie in the middle of it. I sat there, and I listened to every single warning, and I filed each one in the part of my brain marked applies to other people. Because I was the man who found the fault. 40 years, 2/100ths of a millimeter. I have caught contractors, I have caught suppliers. I once caught a Polish subcontractor falsifying hardness test certificates, and it took me 11 days and a lot of paperwork, and I was correct. That is my whole identity. I am the man who is not fooled. You see it now. I could not see it then. The confidence was not a defense. The confidence was the opening. Why the Philippines and not Thailand, not Vietnam, since everybody asks? Sven, yes, partly. But the real reason is stupid and small, and it is the truth. Language. I was 62 years old. My English is school English plus 40 years of technical manuals. It works. It is not elegant, it is not fast, but it works. And when Marianne died, I lost the person I had spoken Swedish with for 31 years, and I could not do it again. I could not go somewhere and be deaf. Sit in a room while people made sounds around me and understood each other and not me. That was the thing I had just escaped. In the Philippines, the girl in the mercury drug explains the difference between 2 brands of paracetamol to me in English. And she is not doing me a favor. She is just working. That was worth more to me than beaches. Manila was too much even for me. 6 weeks, and I understood that a man seeking noise can still be crushed by it. So I went down to Cebu. Rented a place in Mabolo, $18,000 a month, about 3,000 kroner, 1 bedroom, hot water that worked in the afternoon and not in the morning. There was a basketball court 40 meters from my window, and boys played on it from 6 in the morning until they could not see the ball. There was a rooster somewhere that had no idea what time sunrise was. The neighbor did karaoke on Fridays and Sundays. Perfect. I mean that. And then I did nothing for about 2 months. I want to be clear that I am not describing a rich retirement. I got up, I bought coffee at a place near Gaisano. I walked, I watched. I did not speak to anybody except to order things. I read the newspaper. I went to the SM and sat in the food court, which I recommend actually, if you are a person who cannot be alone in a quiet room. A Filipino mall food court on a Saturday is the loudest place on earth, and nobody looks at you. 2 months of that. I was, if you had asked me, fine. Then a carinderia on a side street off AS Fortuna, the one with the trays under glass, P65 for rice and adobo. and there was a piece of bone in it, and I bit down, and something in my upper left went. Not agony. A crack, and then a cold feeling in the tooth every time I breathed in. The clinic was in Mandaue, up a flight of stairs above a hardware store, aircon unit dripping into a bucket, a poster of the human jaw with the corners curled, Dr. Villamore, and his assistant. She was 38, cherry, small, quick, unimpressed. She had the suction in one hand and the light in the other, and she moved like somebody who has done a thing 11,000 times, which, I know what that looks like. I have watched machinists my whole life. There are men who have done a job for 20 years and still look at their hands. She did not look at her hands. Upper left 5, cracked cusp, they built it back up with composite. P4500, about 750 kroner, which I remember thinking was roughly 1/8 of what it would cost in Västerås. While I was in the chair, I tried to say, "Thank you" in Cebuano. "Salamat." I said it wrong. I put the emphasis in the wrong place, apparently. She corrected me. Flat, no smile, the way you correct a child or a colleague. Then she went back to the suction. She did not apologize for it. I have thought about why that mattered so much, and I think it is this. Nobody in 14 months had corrected me about anything. When your wife dies, people handle you. They agree with you. They speak carefully around you like you are a part that might crack. She just told me I said it wrong. There were 2 follow-ups, then a third that I probably did not need, then coffee at a place in Banilad, and then coffee again. 4 months of that. 4 months. And here is the number that mattered. The one I kept returning to. The one I actually wrote down in the back of my head like a measurement. In 4 months, she asked me for nothing. Not once. Not a load for her phone. Not a taxi fare. Nothing. She had a job. She had instruments. She worked to tolerances. I remember walking home from Banilad one afternoon in the heat, past the sari-sari store with the plastic bags of water hanging up, and realizing I had not thought about Skiljebo since breakfast. Whole afternoon. Gone. Just an afternoon. Like a person has. That was the first one. I want to explain why I did not think this was one of the stories, because you are sitting there watching this, and you already know. You have known since chapter 1. And Kian, one need you to understand that from inside it, it did not look like that at all. So here is my evidence. This is the actual list I would have given you at the time, and I would have given it in this order, because I am a man who makes lists. 1. She refused money 3 times. Not once. 3 times. And I have the occasions. The first was a taxi fare, P180, about 30 kroner, and she said no and took the jeepney. The second was when I offered to pay for her phone load, and she laughed at me, actually laughed, and said the load was P50. And did I think she was a beggar? The third was bigger. Her scooter needed a new drive belt, P22200, and I said I would pay it, and she got, not angry, cold. She said, "Björn, I have worked since I was 17. And then she did not answer my messages for a day and a half. 2. She paid for meals. Twice. Not big meals. We are talking about a chowking on Gorordo. But she paid, and she was annoyed when I tried to take the receipt. 3. She had her own apartment in Mandaue that I did not see for 4 months. She had her own salary, $16,000 a month, about 2,700 kroner, which for a dental assistant in Cebu is normal, not good, not bad. She had her own opinions about my shirts, which were, she said, clothes for a man who has given up. 4. She never once told me a sad story. In 4 months, not one. No sick carabao, no typhoon roof, no brother in trouble with a lending company. Nothing. You see what I did? I had a checklist. Sven gave me the checklist over San Miguel in Ermita, and I ran her against it, item by item, and she cleared every item, and I concluded that she was safe. That is not how you test a part. That is how you test a part against the last part that failed. It tells you nothing about the ways the new one might fail. I knew that. I taught that to apprentices. And I did not apply it, because I was not doing an inspection. I was doing something else and calling it an inspection. Anyway, the first money that moved was my idea. I want that on the record. Nobody asked. Around month 5, I said it was ridiculous, me in Mabalo, her in Mandaue, both of us paying rent, and we should take one place together. She said no. Then she said her mother would be ashamed. Then, 2 weeks later, she said yes, but only if we were serious. And she used that word, serious, in a way that I understood was a question about the rest of my life. We took a 2-bedroom in Banilad near the country mall. P28,000 a month, about 4,700 kroner. Aircon in the bedroom, a small balcony where you could see one corner of the sea if you leaned. There was a security guard called Boy, who was 60 at least, and everyone called him Boy. 28,000, 4,700 kroner for a 2-bedroom apartment in the second city of the country. I did the arithmetic on the balcony the first night with a beer. My house in Skiljabo had cost me, in running costs alone, heating and tax and insurance, about 6,800 kroner a month. To live alone in a room I could not sit in. I said out loud, I think, "This is a bargain. Listen to me. Somebody should tell young men, and old men, mostly old men, that a bargain is the most dangerous thing you can hand to a Swede. We are not greedy people. We are not the sort who lose money on a casino. But show a Swede a favorable ratio, and he will walk into anything. Anything. Because he is not spending, he is optimizing, and optimizing is a virtue. And he will keep optimizing his way down a hole with very good numbers all the way to the bottom." Then Bohol. Month 6, maybe 7. The fast craft from Pier 1 to Tagbilaran. 2 hours, 800 return. And then a habal up into the hills past Lobak. 40 minutes, my knees around the driver's hips and my bag on my back. Rice terraces, a carabao standing in a ditch looking at nothing. That green, I had never seen a green like that. It is not a color we have. The family home was concrete block downstairs, wood and nipa above, corrugated roof, a Santo Niño on a shelf with plastic flowers, and a rosary over the corner of the frame. Chickens under the house. A basketball hoop nailed to a coconut palm with no net. They killed a pig. I did not know they were going to kill a pig. I had brought, this is the part that embarrasses me, I had brought a box of Danish butter cookies from the Gaisano and a bottle of Tandouet, and I thought that was generous. And there were about 40 people there. Neighbors. The barangay captain came. Somebody's uncle brought a karaoke machine on a tricycle, and it ran for 9 hours. Her father is Nonoy. Small man, 66, hands like tree roots, worked as a carpenter, and then his back went. Her mother is Belen, who fed me constantly and with force. 3 younger siblings, Rowena, 29, married with 2 children, Jomar, 24, no work, and Angel May, 19, who was the clever one, and everyone said so in front of her. And Cherry is the eldest. I did not understand what that meant yet. I understood it as a fact about birth order. In that house, it is a job description. Everyone called me Sir Björn. Little children were pushed towards me to do the mano, taking my hand to their forehead, and I did not know what to do with my hand, and I did it wrong for about a year. And the word I kept hearing, in the yard, from the men with the red horse, Cano, which is short for Americano and means any white man, and it does not mean anything bad. It just means a category. And the category comes with a number attached to it that you never see, but everybody else in the yard can see it, and the number is large. That night, on a plastic chair, Cherry explained utang na loob to me. She did not hide it. That is the thing I want people to hear. She sat there and explained it plainly, like a colleague explaining a procedure. Debt of the inside. You owe what was given. Her parents fed her, so she feeds them. Her mother had 10 pesos and gave her 5. That does not expire. There is no state pension here worth the name. There is no insurance. The family is the insurance, and she is the eldest daughter, so she is the policy. And she said, "You should know this before, not after." I thought, this is an honest woman. I still think that, partly. That is the trouble. Then Nonoy said something to me across the table in Cebuano, and Cherry translated it. And she translated it carefully, watching my face. You will take care of her, and she will take care of all of us. This is normal. And I heard a blessing. I heard an old carpenter giving his daughter to a machinist and saying, in the way old men say it, we are a family now. That is not what it was. That was a specification. That was a man telling me the load rating and the duty cycle straight out at the start. No deception in it at all. I signed the lease in Banilad the following week. P28,000 a month. 2 months deposit. 1 month advance. I remember thinking it was cheap. The gallbladder was real. I need to say that first, before anything else in this chapter, because everything 1 a.m. about to tell you gets used as evidence later by people watching this, and they will get it wrong if I do not say it plainly. Belen had gallstones. I saw the ultrasound. I stood in the corridor of the Vicente Soto Memorial Medical Center at 6:30 in the morning, with the fans going and about 90 people waiting on plastic chairs. And I saw the surgeon, and afterwards Belen showed me the stones in a specimen cup like she was showing me a grandchild. 6 of them. Gray-brown. The biggest, maybe 8 millimeters. 25,000. About 16,000 kroner. Or roughly $1,700. You have to understand what happens in a family here when a bill like that arrives. There is no insurance. PhilHealth covers a fraction, and then it stops. What happens is that the family sits down and everyone gives what they have. Rowena gives P3,000. Jomar gives nothing because Jomar has nothing. Somebody sells a pig. Somebody borrows from a lending investor at 5% per month, which is how families here get destroyed slowly over 10 years. That is the actual mechanism. That is what happens if the Kano is not there. And I was there, and I paid it in one transfer from my BPI account on a Tuesday morning, and it took 4 minutes, and it did not change my life by any measurable amount. I want to tell you how that felt, because if I do not, none of the rest makes sense. 14 months of being a man that people handled. 14 months of being the widower in the corner at Christmas. And then, in a hot corridor in Cebu, I was the reason a 61-year-old woman was going to be alive at 70. 4 minutes, P95,000. That is not generosity. Let us be very clear. That is a man buying something he needed very badly at a price he considered extremely favorable. Then it was Angel May, the clever one, 19, at the University of Bohol, tourism management. P40,000 a semester, about 6,700 kroner, and that is with the fees and the books and the boarding in Tagbilaran. She got a 1.5 in her first semester, which they explained to me is good. The numbers run backwards here. Then a nephew's school shoes and uniform, P2,800. Then the roof on the back of the house in the hills, the corrugated sheets, P24,000, after the wind in October. Then a cousin, and I met this cousin twice, whose motorbike needed repair, P18,000, and the motorbike turned out on inspection to be a motorbike that did not exist yet. It became a down payment on a Honda TMX. I found this out 3 months later, and I said nothing, because by then I had learned that in Bohol you do not say something like that out loud in a yard where people can hear you. That is where the notebook starts. It was a green Muji notebook, A5 squared paper, which I had bought at the National Bookstore in the Ayala Center, Cebu, for P185. I ruled 4 columns with a steel rule I had brought from Sweden, which tells you something about me. Date, recipient, peso, kronor. I told myself I kept it because that is what I am, a man who logs things. I logged every Part 1 ever rejected for 38 years, and I logged my fuel consumption, and I logged Marianne's blood pressure for the last 6 years of her life. Twice a day, in a book exactly like that one. That is what I told myself. But I want to be honest with you, since we are here. You do not start a log unless somewhere underneath you have a question. Nobody measures a thing they are certain about. I had a question. I had had it for months. I just would not let it up into the part of the brain where it could be looked at, so it went into a notebook instead, in 4 neat columns. Now, the signs. This is the part everybody wants. One will give them to you honestly, and I will give you what I said to myself, which is the more useful half. The phone, always face down, on the table, on the counter, on the arm of the chair, screen down, every time, automatically, without a thought. I said to myself, every person under 50 in this country does that, and that is true. That is completely true. It is still true today. The cousin. His name was Boye. He was around a lot in the 2nd year. He did some driving for the family, and he was maybe 28. And he called her ma'am. Not always, that is the thing. Most of the time he called her Ate Cherry, which is normal, older sister. But when there was money in the conversation, he called her ma'am, and he said it the way a man says it to somebody who employs him. I said to myself, I do not understand the register of a language I do not speak, which is also true. The hours, the requests came at night, almost always after 10, and often after 11, and always urgent, and always by Gcash. Never in the daytime, never sitting across the table. I said to myself, people have emergencies at night. Hospitals are at night. And that is true too. You notice that all my rationalizations were true. That is the trap. They were not lies, I told myself. They were facts, correctly stated, doing the work of a lie. And the years. She would not talk about 2015 to 2020. Not refused. She was never dramatic about it. She would fog. I would ask where she was working before the clinic, and she would say Manila for a while, and then somewhere else. And then she would ask if I wanted the aircon lower. 6 years of a woman's life. And I had the resolution of a bad photograph. I asked twice in 2 years. That is my failure, and I own it entirely. And here is the sentence I used to keep the whole structure standing. I was proud of it. I said it to myself walking home. I said it once out loud to Sven on the phone. Jealousy is not a measurement. That is a good line. It is even, in a narrow sense, correct. Jealousy is not data. A suspicious old man is not an instrument. But what I did with it was, every time an anomaly appeared, I labeled it jealousy and threw it away without recording it. For about 2 years. And any engineer who hears that will tell you exactly what that is. That is not rigor. That is discarding all readings that disagree with the model and then congratulating yourself on how well the model fits. I estimate that line cost me around $600,000, say 100,000 kroner, roughly $11,000, For 4 words, I proposed in the second week of December, on the balcony in Banalad, badly, with no ring because I had not thought that far ahead. There was a Christmas parole hanging in the window of the apartment opposite, the star-shaped lantern, blinking out of sync with the one next door. Somebody's karaoke was doing Silent Night, 3 buildings over. She cried. She put both hands flat over her face and cried and did not say anything for a long time. And then she said, "You do not know what you are asking." I thought that was humility. I thought that was a woman from a poor family who could not believe her luck. And I remember feeling, and this is the ugliest thing in this whole story, worse than the money, I remember feeling generous, magnanimous. 63 years old, standing on a balcony, being a good man to a woman who had less than me. I have gone over that moment a great many times since. I still believe she was crying for a real reason. I am fairly sure now it was not the one I assigned to it. Somewhere around then, the notebook went past 1,000,000 pesos. I did not add it up. I had 4 neat columns, 2 years of entries, a steel rule, and 38 years of professional discipline about measurement, and I did not add up the column. There is a word for a man who collects data and refuses to total it. I do not think it is a nice word. We married at the Cebu City Hall on a Thursday morning in March, which I did not plan and only noticed afterwards. March. Marianne died in March. I sat in the car outside the building and worked out the date, and then I went in anyway, because what is the alternative? You cannot forbid a month. The civil ceremony took 11 minutes. There were 4 couples ahead of us, and the judge did all of us in about an hour. And there was an electric fan on a stand that clicked every time it turned. 2,500, including the license and the fixer who handled the papers, which is nothing. That is 420 kroner to change a man's legal status in a country. The church blessing was in Bohol 2 months later, and that was not nothing. 180,000, roughly 30,000 kroner, about $3,200. You cannot have the church wedding without the civil one first. That is the order here, and Belen wanted the church very badly, and I understood by then that this was not vanity. In that barangay, a woman who is only civil married is a woman with a question mark on her. So, the church at Lobok, the flowers, the 200 guests, the lechon, 2 of them, $9,000 each, the string band, the sponsors. There were 14 principal sponsors, ninitos and ninangs, and I could not tell you today who half of them were. That is the padrino system. You do not choose your godparents for sentiment. You choose them upward, for the connections, and I was the connection everyone else was choosing. I wore a barong that somebody's brother-in-law had made in 3 days, piña cloth, stiff at the collar, and I sweated through it before the ceremony started. And I want to say this clearly, because everything after it is dark, and this is the only place I can put it. I was happy. Standing in that church with the fans going, and the children running in the side aisle, and somebody's phone ringing during the vows, and Nonoy in a barong 2 sizes too big for him. I was happier than I had been in 3 years. Cherry laughed at me for the sweating. I was 63 and married, and there were 200 people in a building who wanted to feed me. If you want to know why men do this, that is why. It is not the woman. It is the 200 people. Then, the house. Nonoy had land, about 800 square meters on the slope above the family place, coconut and a few cacao, and there was already a foundation on it from something abandoned in the 90s. I knew the law. I want that stated plainly, because there will be comments under this video from people who think I did not know. I knew. Foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines. Not through a wife, not through a friend, not through a lawyer with an idea. You can own a condominium unit, up to 40% foreign ownership in the building. And that is the whole of it. If you build a house on family land, the house is on land that belongs to somebody who is not you, and there is no arrangement, no contract, no long lease, no clever corporate structure that survives a family deciding otherwise. I knew all of that in advance. I read it. I read it in English on 3 separate government-adjacent websites while sitting in a Bose coffee in the Ayala Center. And I built anyway, and I am going to tell you exactly how I talked myself into it, because the reasoning is the interesting part. One told myself, usable life. That is a machinist's argument. A bearing has a design life. You do not ask whether you own the bearing in 40 years, you ask what it does in the years it runs. I said to myself, I am 63. If I live to 83, that house serves me for 20 years, and I have paid 250,000 kroner for 20 years of housing, which is 1,000 kroner a month, which is nothing. And underneath that, the second argument, the real one. What else is the money for? Who is it for? Elin has a flat in Uppsala, and a husband who is a physiotherapist, and she does not need it. Marianne is dead. I am not going to be buried with it. P1.4 million. Around 235,000 kroner, roughly $25,000. Titled to Nonoi. Of course, it could not be anything else. Construction took 7 months. I was there for most of it, every day, in a bucket hat, being useless in a way I enjoyed enormously. The contractor was Cherry's uncle, Pepe. Now, I have spent 38 years catching people who fudge a measurement. I found things on that build within the first 3 weeks. The cement was being invoiced at P285 a bag, when the yard in Tagbilaran was selling it at P245. The rebar in the ground floor columns was 10 mm, where the drawing said 12. There were 11 bags of cement, fewer on site, than on the delivery note on the 14th of June. And I know that because I counted them, because I am the sort of man who counts bags of cement. Total, I would estimate, around P90,000 taken out of the middle of that project by the uncle. Say 15,000 kroner. And I said nothing. Not one word. In 7 months. I want you to understand it was not weakness, or not only weakness. By then, I had learned what happens if you say that out loud in a yard in Bohol. It is not a discussion. You do not get a corrected invoice. What you get is that Pepe loses face in front of his brothers, and Pepe's wife stops coming, and Belen cries, and for the next 15 years there is a hole at the table, and everyone knows the Kano did it. Saving face is not politeness here. It is load-bearing. So I paid the inflated cement, and I logged it in the green notebook in the 4th column, and I let the man take his 15,000 kroner. And I told myself I was being culturally intelligent. I was, a bit. I was also being a coward. Both. The house was finished in November. 2 bedrooms, tiled floor, a proper CR, a water tank on a stand, and a terrace where you could sit in the evening and hear the frogs going in the rice below, and the basketball court down at the barangay hall, and somebody's karaoke. Always somebody's karaoke, doing total eclipse of the heart. We spent 11 nights in it. Total. In the whole time, I owned it. Or did not own it. The cracks came in a bad order, which is why I did not react properly. First, a phone call. I came in from the terrace in Banilad, and Cherry was on the phone in Cebuano. Fast, and she stopped. Not lowered her voice. Stopped. Mid-word. And then she said something to whoever it was in a completely different tone, and hung up within 10 seconds. Second, the photograph. I was going through Rowena's Facebook because I was looking for pictures of the wedding to send to Elin, And Facebook shows you everything. It goes back years, and there was a post from 2019. A birthday in the yard at the house in the hills, and in the background of the frame, not the subject, out of focus. At the end of the table with a San Miguel in front of him, a big man, 50-something, pale, the build and the coloring of a Dutchman or a German, and I do not know why I was so certain, but I was, untagged, no name. Nobody in 11 comments mentioned him. Third, and this is the one, Belen in the kitchen in Bohol, saying something about how the terrace was better than before, with, and then Cherry said her name. Just her name. Belen stopped and looked at the pan. 3 anomalies inside about 5 weeks. And here is where I stopped being a husband and became something else. And I am not sure it is better. Because a man who is in love confronts. He shouts, or he cries, or he demands, and he gets a story. And the story is either true or it is a better story than the one he had. A machinist does not do that. When you get 3 readings that disagree with your model, you do not argue with the part. The part is not lying to you. Your instrument is wrong, or your datum is wrong, and there is only one thing to do about it. You remeasure. I sat on that balcony in Banilad with a warm San Miguel, and I did not decide to catch my wife. I decided to run a test. You cannot test a system by asking it questions. The system will give you the answer it has prepared. You have to change the input and watch what comes out. That is not cunning. That is Tuesday morning at a bearings plant. If you suspect a machine is drifting, you do not ask the operator whether the machine is drifting. You feed it a part you have measured yourself, and you see what it does to it. So, in January, I became stupid. It started small, and it started almost as a joke, which is how I got over the shame of it. I was in the Sari Sari store at the end of our street in Banilad, buying a bottle of water, P20, and I held out a 50 and a 20, and I pretended I could not tell them apart. The woman behind the grill, Nang Ising, she must be 70. She sells sachets of shampoo and single cigarettes, and she is one of the genuinely good people in this story. She took the 20 and gave me back nothing and said, "Sir, this one is 20. Very slowly, and patted the note. And I thought, nobody in this country has ever once been surprised by a foreigner who cannot count money. That was the whole insight. The disguise was already there. It was pre-fitted. I did not have to build a character. I only had to stop resisting the one everybody had assigned me on the first day. So I let it happen. I started forgetting my Gcash PIN. Twice a week I would sit on the sofa with the phone and make a small noise of frustration, and Cherry would come and take it out of my hand and do it herself. I made sure she saw me write the PIN on the inside back cover of the green notebook, which was a lie. It was not the PIN, it was 1 digit out. I started asking prices out loud at family dinners, loudly. In the yard in Bohol, over the pancit, with 11 people at the table. How much is a sack of rice now? How much does the hobble hobble cost to Lobach? How much is a semester at the university, really? All in. And I would say the number back wrong, high, and let somebody correct me. And I would look confused and pleased at the same time. I bought a bucket hat. I am not proud of the hat. The most effective thing I did was the thing that cost nothing. I stopped correcting anybody. When a figure did not add up, I said, "Ah, okay," and nodded. When Pepe explained a cost, I said, "Ah, okay." 38 years of being the man who says, "That is not what the drawing says," and I turned it off like a light. And I want to tell you what happened, because it was worse than anything I found on a document. Within about 6 weeks, the requests changed shape. Not the amount at first. the craftsmanship. Before, a request came with a structure. There was an illness. There was a hospital. There was a name of a doctor. There was a number that was odd. P18,400, not P20,000, because a real bill has a strange number on the end of it. Real requests are ugly. Fake ones are round. After 6 weeks of me being an idiot, the requests came in round. 15,000 $20,000, $25,000, and with less attached. For emergency. That was one of them, in a message at 11:40 at night. 3 words. No illness. Nobody even bothered to invent a sick person. They had recalibrated to the customer. That is all it was. That is not evil. It is not personal. It is what any workshop does. You find out what the tolerance is, and you work to it. If the inspector cannot see 12 mm from 10 mm, you use 10 mm. And you are not a monster. You are just a man responding to the actual specification instead of the written one. I had told them the tolerance was infinite, so they used it. By March, the notebook had gone from a bit over $1 million to P2.1 million. 2 years and a bit, all in. Roughly 350,000 kroner. Call it $38,000 at that point. And that was before you counted the house. Then I did the seating. 3 amounts, 3 people, on the same day, each with one different detail attached. And each detail was something a person would repeat. To Jomar, 8,000, and I said it was because my pension had come through early. To Rowena, P12,000, and I said it was from money I had from selling a watch. To Boye, the driver, 5,000, and I said nothing at all about where it came from, only that he should not mention it. Then I sat and waited to hear my own words come back at me. 11 days. Cherry, in the kitchen in Banilad, not looking up, said something about my pension being early this month, and would it be early again in April. Jomar's branch. Fine. Expected. That tells me only that a brother talks to a sister, which is not a crime. But 2 weeks after that, Boye, the one who was told to say nothing, asked me in the car, in a very careful voice, whether I had sold the watch. He had the wrong item from the wrong person. Which means the 3 things had been in the same conversation. Which means somebody was collecting all of it and sorting it, and it had gone around and come back, scrambled the way a thing does when it has passed through several hands. That is not proof of anything a court would want. I know that. But it told me the shape of the thing. There was a routing system. There was a switchboard. And my wife was sitting at it. Meanwhile, and this is the part that actually ended it, not any of my cleverness, I had gone to the PSA. I want to be clear that this was the sensible thing, and I did it 2 years too late. And I only did it because I am the kind of man who checks paper when he cannot check anything else. You go to the PSA Serbilis office, you queue, you fill the form, you pay. A Sinamar, Certificate of No Marriage Record, is about T210 if you do it yourself and wait. I did not do it myself. I used a lawyer in Cebu City to request certified copies with authentication and to run a search under both her maiden name and 2 spellings, and with his fee that came to P18,000, around 3,000 kroner, $300. It took 19 days. It came in a brown envelope, and I opened it standing up in the lobby of the building on Osmania Boulevard with the guard watching me, and it was not a Senamar at all, because you only get a Senamar if there is no marriage. What I got was an advisory on marriages and a certified copy of a marriage certificate. Cherry Loretta Salazar, married the 11th of September, 2011, Cagayan de Oro City. To a man whose name I am not going to say on this channel. No annulment, no annotation, nothing. 14 years, and the file was exactly as it had been the day it was written. I stood there and did the thing my brain does, which is that it went to the mechanism before it went to the feeling. There is no divorce in this country, none. It is the only country in the world besides the Vatican with no divorce. If you want out, it is annulment, and annulment is $300,000 to $800,000 and 2 to 5 years of psychologists and lawyers and hearings, and most people simply never do it. They separate, and they move, and they live with someone else, and the paper stays. So her marriage in 2011 was still live, which meant the ceremony at Cebu City Hall was void. Not voidable. Void. It never existed. I had not been married for 2 years. I had been a witness at nothing. And the second thought, arriving about 4 seconds behind the first, cold as water. I am not trapped. I did not go home that night. I got a room at a hotel on Fuente Osmeña, and I sat with the envelope on the bed. The rest came from the aunt, Auntie Nita, Balin's older sister, who had been in a fight with Nonoy for 8 months about who was going to live in the new house. The house I built, and who had lost that fight. She called me. I did not go to her. She called me, and she was crying before she said anything useful. And she said it in the way people here say a terrible thing, sideways and with apologies stacked in front of it. There is a Dutchman. There has been a Dutchman since 2019. He comes twice a year, and he sends money every month. And then she said the sentence I have not been able to put down since. You are not the first one to build that house. I never confronted her. People find that harder to accept than the money. Every man who hears this story asks me the same thing. You did not even ask her? Not one word? And I understand the question. There is a shape a story like this is supposed to have. There is a scene in it where the man stands in the doorway with a piece of paper and says the sentence, and she cries, or she screams, or she goes cold. And then there is an ending. I did not want that scene. A confrontation is a request for a story. That is all it is. You put the evidence on the table, and you ask the other person to explain it, and what comes back is a story. And the story will be a good one because she has had 6 years to think about it. And I would sit there and I would want to believe it, because I am 63, and I had a house and a mother-in-law who put more rice on my plate than I could eat. I had all the stories I needed. I had a certified marriage certificate from 2011. Documents do not improvise. So I went to Manila. I told her I had a bank thing to sort out, and I took the early flight from Mactan, and I got a room at a place in Ermita, 200 a night, about 370 kroner. The kind of hotel with a printed sign in the lift about not bringing food from outside. The air conditioning made the same noise as the one Sven and I stayed in on my very first week, 4 years earlier. That was... I sat on the bed and laughed at that. I did laugh. And then I got out the green notebook, and I added up the column. I want you to understand what a strange thing that was. 2.5 years of entries. Date, recipient, peso, kronor, ruled with a steel rule I brought from Sweden. And I had never once totaled it. A man who spent 38 years measuring things had built a complete data set and refused to compute the result, because the result was the only thing in the whole enterprise he did not want to know. It took me about 40 minutes with the calculator on the phone, doing it twice to check. The transfers, the support, the medical, the tuition, the wedding, the drip, P2.63 million. The house, P1.4 million. Together, near enough P4 million, around 670,000 kroner. Say $47,000, near enough, out of the roughly $162,000 I landed with, which by then had also had 4 years of living taken out of it. So, not destroyed. I want to be precise, because I have seen the men who were destroyed, and I am not one of them. I had about $110,000 left, and a Swedish pension that had finally started paying, a bit over 15,000 kroner a month before tax, which in this country is a comfortable life if you do not have a village attached to you. I was not ruined. I was expensively educated. And the house is the part that still catches me at odd moments. It is standing right now, this evening, up on that slope above Lobach. 2 bedrooms, tiled, water tank on a stand, the terrace where you can hear the frogs, titled to Nonoi. It always was. There is no arrangement I could have made that would have changed that, and I knew it when I poured the foundation. I will never see it again. I could not sell it if the entire family agreed to let me, because it was never mine to sell. 11 nights. That is what I got out of it. 11 nights. The one mercy in all of this was legal, and it is the only piece of luck in the story, and it came from the same document that ruined everything. Because she was already married in 2011 and never annulled, my marriage was void from the beginning. Not voidable, void. It never existed in law. Which means I did not need an annulment. I could not have one. You cannot annul a thing that never happened. I needed a petition for declaration of nullity, which in my situation, with a certified prior marriage certificate sitting in front of the judge, is not a psychological evaluation and a 4-year fight. It is paperwork. 120,000 tours with the lawyer, about 20,000 kroner. 14 months, mostly waiting. Compare that to what I was looking at if the paper had been clean. $500,000 and 3 to 5 years, and men sitting in Dumagete right now on year 4. I got out through the hole she made. There is a joke in that somewhere, and I have not found the funny part yet. There is a strange grief in being told officially that the last 3 years did not legally occur. I had a document from the court that said, in effect, nothing happened, and I stood in a corridor holding it and thought, but I was happy in that church. 200 people. The fans going. Rock bottom was not the money, and it was not the court. It was the phone call. I rang Elin on a Sunday. I remember I had just eaten, of all things, a hamburger from a Jollibee near the hotel, which is not a good hamburger. I do not know why I keep buying them. And I had to say the sentence out loud. 63 years old, 38 years of being the man who finds the fault, and I had to say, I was wrong about all of it, and it cost about 500,000 kroner. She did not say, I told you. She did not say anything for maybe 4 seconds. Then she asked whether I had somewhere to sleep, and whether I was eating. That was worse. That was much worse. If she had been angry, I could have argued. Now, the part 1 have to say, and I know some of you will not want to hear it. Bellen's gallbladder was real. I saw the stones. Angel May graduated. She works at a resort on Panglao now, and she sent me a message when she got the job, which she did not have to do. The pig at that first dinner was real, and it was a real pig, and they could not afford it. And Cherry, I think some part of it was real. I am not saying that because I am soft. I am saying it because it is the only reading that fits all the data. A woman who is purely working you does not refuse a P2200 drive belt and not answer your messages for a day and a half. That is not in the playbook. That cost her, and she did it anyway, and I have never been able to make it fit any other model. So I believe both things were true at once. She was fond of me, and she was running a 6-year arrangement I was never told about, and there is no contradiction in that. I keep wanting there to be one. There is not. I will not call her a monster. She is the eldest daughter of a poor family in a country with no safety net. And she did discarte, and some of it was survival, and some of it was theft. And the line between those two things is a lot blurrier when you are the one standing on it. I am angry with her. I miss her. Both. I am in Dumaguete now. Rented place 2 streets back from the boulevard, $16,000 a month, about 2,700 kroner. Sven is 15 minutes away, and Rowena feeds me on Sundays and tells me I am too thin, which is a lie. There are tricycles at all hours and a videoke place on the corner that murders Bohemian Rhapsody most Fridays, and the noise is still, 4 years on, the thing I came for. I phone Elin every Sunday, not every other week, every Sunday, and I have not started another notebook. So, the wisdom, if that is what this is, every measurement needs a datum. A datum is a fixed reference that you have established independently, not one the part reports about itself. If your datum is wrong, every single measurement after it is wrong, and they will all agree with each other beautifully, and you will be confident, and you will be confidently wrong for 2.5 years. My datum was what she told me about herself. That is the whole error. Everything else was downstream. The practical version, for anybody sitting there thinking about a woman in this country, a Cenomar from the PSA costs a couple of hundred pesos over the counter and around $18,000 if you have a lawyer do it properly, with authentication under every spelling of her name. That is a few $100s. It arrives in a brown envelope in 3 weeks, and it does not love you. It does not cry. It does not have a sick mother, and it does not change its story. Do it before the wedding. Do it before the house. Do it while you still like her, because that is exactly when you will not want to. And the second thing, which is harder, and which I would rather not say, I was not taken because I was stupid. I have never been stupid about a machine in my life. I was taken because I was certain, because I had 40 years of being right, and I brought that certainty to a place where all my instruments were calibrated for a different country, and I never once considered that the man holding the gauge might be the problem. If you are the smartest man in your workshop, you are exactly who this happens to. That is Björn Ekström, 63, formerly of Västerås, currently of Dumaguete. We want to be careful with the word scammer, because Björn himself won't use it cleanly, and he asked us not to. What happened to him was not a bar girl and a sad story. It was a family that mostly needed what it said it needed, wrapped around one specific document-shaped lie. A marriage from 2011 that was never dissolved. Because in this country there is no divorce, and annulment costs more than most families will see in a decade. Millions of Filipinos are legally married to people they have not lived with in 15 years. That is not always a plot. Very often it is just poverty and paperwork. But it is the one thing you can check. That is the whole point of tonight's story. Björn spent 2.5 years running an elaborate operation to catch what a certificate told him in 19 days for the price of a decent phone. The clever part was not the disguise. The clever part was the brown envelope, and he could have had it on month 1. And notice how his story ends compared to most of the ones we cover here. He is out. No annulment, no bigamy charge, no 5-year court case, roughly $110,000 still in the bank, and a pension paying. That is what a close call looks like. It still cost him a house he can never enter, and a marriage that legally never occurred, and he would still tell you he got off lightly. If you've run the Cenomar check yourself, or if you found something in it, tell us in the comments. Those comments help more men than anything we put in the script. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves out there, and we'll see you next time, here on Inside the Philippines.